I told Randy that I felt like I was back in grade school or junior high. I was this weekend wishing for another snow day. Then I saw we were going to be in between. So, but we're glad to talk about our project. Actually, you're going to hear from several of our team members. And I started, unlike we were doing the Academy Awards last night, unlike at the movies where all the folks who do all of the hard work, you see their names scrolling at the very end when we're getting up and leaving and ignoring. I wanted to start with our team, which at several moments throughout last fall and throughout this process, I think there are several of us thinking, okay, this is crashing, or we've hit another road bump, or we've hit another wall. And there would always be someone there in the room with an idea to keep us going. And so several of these folks, you're going to hear from several today. Josh Hawthorne, a grad student over in communication. The two fellows, it's actually myself and Brian Houston. Alicia, you'll hear from in just a bit, a grad student here in the J School, and other folks who are in the room. David Wolfgang is here, a grad student in the J School. I saw Mike somewhere. There's Mike. A student too, and other folks. And then our motivational leader, Esther Thorson, who was always the one at 1 or 2 a.m. in the morning when some system would crash or data sift would not produce or something would happen and we would look at each other. She was usually the one, well, maybe if we do this. And keeping us going. So it really was a team effort, and we refer to ourselves as the RJI Twitter team. Today we're going to spend a few minutes, as Randy said, bringing you up to date on some of the activities that we've been involved with for the past several months since last August. And I'll even in just a bit sort of go back a bit further than that and sort of bring you into this project of the ideas that we had that got us to live tweeting analysis of live tweeting the 2012 debates. First, I'm going to talk just a bit about our We the Tweeters project. And you're going to see here is where we started to partner with news organizations and try to understand some of their practices in using social media, particularly as it revolves around the 2012 presidential debates. We'll then hear a bit about some of the research, the analysis, the academic stuff that's coming out of the project, one of the pieces, and Josh will talk to you a bit about social watching debate study. I think Esther may have coined that term, social watching debates. It is brilliant, yes. And then we will, Brian will share with us some of the goals and next steps. But this project started with a group of us well over a year ago as we were entering into the 2012 election campaign. Several of us studied political communication, and then particularly politics and news, politics and media. And I know we were having some discussions well before even last spring of, okay, what's going on? What might be happening in the political arena, in the news arena this season? What might we need to be aware of and try to be out in front of in terms of analyzing that might set this election apart from others? It usually is the case. I know there was a publication I was involved with in the 2008 presidential campaign where one of the subtitles was the Facebook election or Facebooking politics. Of course, that's so 2008 now. Randy is on to the next social media, but we were trying to understand what might be going on, and certainly we were discussing and thinking about social media as it relates to politics. You see there the vast growing Twitter sphere, and certainly as it relates to election activity and campaign communication. Now, each of these moments were records for Twitter and politics. Each of these moments, and you see they really do span this 1 year. Obama's 2012 State of the Union address at that time was the largest tweets per minute political activity. And you see how that really was dwarfed. We then went into the Democratic Convention in August 52,756 tweets per minute. The debates, 158,000 tweets per minute. Then that became the record political moment. Total for 90 minutes, 10.3 million tweets during that event. And then finally we ended in November. We looked, and I think, Josh, this is right. I said, now let's look at the next State of the Union, which fell back. This still holds the record in terms of the political moment that captured the nation's attention, the world's attention, in terms of those tweeting about politics. Certainly a large number in terms of an event that captures the public's attention. Now, Twitter, of course, picked up on this intersection of social media, tweeting, and politics, and developed their Twindex. And this tracked the campaign. We can't see the light here. You can see their baseline of 50. They followed the sentiment of those tweeting about the two candidates, the two presidential candidates, Obama and Mitt Romney. 50 is their sentiment baseline, something of neutral of all tweets. And then anything above 50 is more positive than all tweets, according to their sentiment measure. And anything below 50 is more negative than the sentiment of all tweets. What you normally see, if you could see this line, maybe you can a little better than me, it's typically the case, what we saw in that election, that political tweets are usually always more negative than all tweets, with only one or two exceptions. You also saw the case, and Josh had some analysis I took out because I knew I was going to run short. Actually, I'm supposed to do 1 minute per slide on the slides that I have this morning. Some correlation that shows the degree to which Obama was either ahead in his sentiment over Romney, tracking the, it was Nate Silver's 538, the tracking polls, the sentiment analysis showing some relationship to what the tracking polls in that election. Now, throughout the spring, as we were heading toward and thinking about our analysis of Twitter and the 2012 presidential elections, we saw several uses of social media, and particularly Twitter, with the debates, the primary debates. Now, this was one effort, the at 140 Town Hall, the Twitter presidential, Republican presidential primary debate. Had a reporter contact me, and we were following so all of the Republican presidential candidates, the debate took place in the Twitter sphere. They all tweeted their responses. My analysis to one reporter, and you know, I've learned you never say anything sort of offhanded or jokingly, and then that's the one thing that they'll quote, is that I said, well, you know, actually as I sat there, it was a 1 hour and they were tweeting. I said, some of these candidates sounded surprisingly more eloquent than they would standing behind a podium speaking 2 or 3 minutes. So in 140 characters, sounded rather eloquent. This is Fox's News use of Twitter in one of their debates, having the viewers of the debate use the hashtag Dodge or Answer, and then charting those throughout the full 60-minute debate as to which candidates, according to the tweets coming in, either dodged or answered the questions. Then finally, and this led us into some of our analysis of the fall debates, this was CNN's Twitter debate. Again, these networks capturing, and I'll show you another statistic in just a bit, Smith and Bowles report, that's actually a Pew report of this dual-screen, two-screen, multi-screen phenomena. This was from the summer, last summer, that report, 52% of all adult cell phone users incorporate their mobile phones with their television watching. This debate by CNN, this primary debate, all the questions came via Twitter to the candidates. Now, that 52%, in terms of a little over half, didn't quite track with, these are results from the fall election, the actual presidential debates. This is also a Pew report. They reported at least 1 in 10 of their viewers, you see 11%, were viewing the presidential debate while using another screen, a second screen. Also, 3% actually were accessing the debate completely with their mobile or online. But certainly there's enough evidence of this dual screen, two screen, multiple screen phenomena and the incorporating of social media with these political events, like a debate. We also, and I'm going to go very lightly on some of the emerging literature, we also know that this again is the Rainey et al. Pew report. 39% of American adults use social media to engage politically, and certainly among those tend to be more predominantly younger citizens using social media. Now here we're starting to see in the research, and you'll hear Josh in just a bit report some of our own, relationships between those who use social media and engaging in politics through social media. Here, and I've cited one such study, shows that those who are more likely to engage in political activity via social media tend to be more engaged in politics in general. So we are starting to see some relationships between, if we call it regular, traditional political engagement and engaging politics through social media. So this brings us to the fall activity that we were engaged in, we the tweeters. And I'd like to spend just a few minutes describing some of our activities, and then Alicia is going to talk about a little bit more in just a bit about our work with newspaper editors in following their readers' use of Twitter in the presidential debates. Now, to give you a review, to take you back, if you need to be reminded of what happened last fall, these were the three highest moments in those debates according to the Twitter sphere, according to those tweeting. The first debate, when Mitt Romney decided to kill Big Bird, that got the most attention by those tweeting. And I'm reminding you this because you're going to see in just a bit, not so from some of the local areas that we were studying. In the second debate, the town hall debate, Romney talked about binders full of women. That got a great deal of attention. And then in the final debate, third presidential foreign policy debate, President Obama reminded Romney that we no longer used horses and bayonets with our foreign policy. And that got a great deal of attention. So those were some of the major moments. Now, what we were interested in terms of our partnering with news organizations, local newspapers. We partnered with two newspapers in large metropolitan areas, the Dallas Morning News and the Jacksonville, it's the Florida Times Union, yes. And the project that we developed was each of the newspapers had their own hashtag that they advertised. We also developed a debate watching guide for their readers that they published in the newspaper. So they were generating readers to use their newspaper's debate hashtag during the debate. We collected all the tweets in real time using that hashtag, charted those tweets, and particularly the spikes during the debates for each of the cities for the readers using those hashtags. We analyzed the Twitter conversation at the points of greatest activity. What were those Twitterers saying at those points? And then we also did some comparison of the two cities. What we generated was a report for each of the newspapers. Again, not our goal, we actually were able to carry through with this. So each night of the debates, by 1 or 2 the next morning, we had this work done, and the information was sent to the newspapers that they then used in their reporting the next day. Now let me give you a little bit of an example of some of the kinds of work that we did. And Josh has this all, he's going, there we go. This is Dallas Morning News. I want to go up. So, and I took an example from the second debate, the Dallas Morning News. A lot of their reporting of their material, of the information that we gathered, reported to them, was online in their online versions. There was some print, but you'll see, I think, why the online versions were most attractive. So here we see the Dallas. This was the second presidential, the town hall presidential debate. The most important moment in that debate for folks in Dallas was not binders full of women. but was discussion of gas prices. Now keep in mind, this was in Dallas. Discussion of gas prices, second most important moment. This was Obama to Romney. You're the last, the least something to get tough on China, foreign policy discussion. You can see some of the other moments too in terms of the most important moments to the Dallas readers, the viewers of the debate, tweeting. We also reported, the newspapers particularly like this, you can see, now this was the word cloud based on the tweets. So not what the candidates were saying, but what the folks who were tweeting. There's several things in here. The Libya you see, for example, I think also it's telling better. Remember, it was Obama's first debate performance that was rather dismal. He rebounded in his second debate performance. The Libya moment of where he was getting hammered by Romney on how he handled that event. That was also the moment that Candy Crowley got in trouble, where she stepped in and said, oh, he did call it a terrorist moment. That moment, you see, got a lot of attention from the Dallas folks. This was Mitt Romney's. A lot of love from the Dallas folks, particularly with tax discussion too. Let me quickly show you some other ways that we reported out. I could close this and go back. Josh is going to take me back. Here is a comparison of the third presidential debate. Now, the time codes are different because of the different time zones. But now you can start to see different moments. Now you can start to see different moments that resonated with the debate viewers in those two cities. The types of now, with Jacksonville, they did get caught up in horses and bayonets. Not so Dallas. And you see different issues that caught the attention of those tweeting the debate in those two cities. Here's another way of looking. And I'll put this back here. Yes. This is back to the town hall, the second presidential. We took all the tweets, and for Dallas in that debate, there were about 1,000, I think was the number, about 1,000 tweets. We were at several hundred in the Jacksonville. We took all the tweets and then did a word analysis of the most commonly mentioned issues in the tweets. These are rank ordered. Now, you can see again for the Jacksonville folks, they did get caught up in women full of binders, women full of binders. Not so much for Dallas. Dallas was interested in jobs, taxes. Guns was important for the folks in Dallas. At least in their tweets, they talked about guns more often. Alicia actually has done some interaction with the editors of the newspapers and will share with us some of their responses to the project.
I really don't need amplification. We have a word cloud, too, from the discussions that went on that evening, but we can't share it publicly. Anyway, I want to get out of here. It was really exciting to talk to the editors. They were really pleased with the content we gave them, and it was in a very timely fashion. You saw it showing up on their websites early in the morning. Dallas and Jacksonville were particularly excited about the process. Seattle, not so much. We're not sure what happened out there. As you can see here, Ryan Rusak, who's the political editor in Dallas, said he was particularly gratified to see that they had 1,000 folks tweeting in the morning. And Frank Denton, who's worked with our journalism school quite a bit, he really sees this as essential to our future. So one of the things we're going to do next, we're promising this publicly now, so we have to do it, is take a look at some of the best practices out there and put together a guide for RJI on what newspapers should be doing in terms of social media to improve their engagement with readers. We find that they're really all over the map. One of the problems we ran into in 2 of the 3 newspapers, their social media editor quit halfway through this project. So those people are really on the move because they know there are jobs out there. So we'll hope to be sharing that with you sometime by the end of the semester. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Josh to talk about the surveys that we did with the newspaper readers right after the Tweeter project.
Thank you. So we wanted to survey the newspaper readers that we had and figure out, what were the effects of this entire project? What influence did engaging in social media conversations over the debate have on likelihood to participate in politics, or likelihood to read the newspaper more, things like that. So we compiled an online survey towards that, and we didn't quite get what we expected, but we found some stuff that was really, really interesting that we're going to share with you today. It's all tied together with this idea of social watching debates and the fact that people don't watch debates alone normally. So who really thinks that if you all watched the presidential debates, did you sit around in your house alone and watch them by yourself, or were you watching with other people in your family or other friends? So think about your past experience with political debates. And like my own, I watch them with my family or friends, or we have a debate party. We thought that most people likely do this, especially with the rise of social media. People are tending to engage in their debate watching experience with Twitter or Facebook more often than they were in the past. So the problem with a lot of debates research is it focuses on the sole debate watching experience. So what happens when one person watches the debate, not with a group of people, or if the interpersonal conversations or mediated conversations that happen with other people during the debate have an impact on those debate variables that we've been examining. And this is all grounded in an idea that interpersonal communication has an influence on our political participation and generally our likelihood to engage in politics and who we support in the political process. And that's been supported by past research. Now, there's generally 3 psychological processes that occur while you're watching a debate when you're exposed to the debate watching content. So you have these people up there arguing over politics, over political issues, and if your supported candidate is attacked, then the person may begin to feel negatively about their own political emotions. They may begin to feel bad about what they think. They may be wrong. So that's a negative emotional response to this situation. People may grow more uncertain regarding their political beliefs and the things that they understand about the world and politics. Or people may experience excitement that they're engaged in a political event that's incredibly important with millions of other people at the same time. So there can be a sense of excitement associated with engaging in politics that way. So we generally found, like past research shows, that people tend to, So if a person can buffer their conversation with others, with people that have the same political views as them, they're less likely to experience those negative feelings associated with the debate message. So they're more likely to find support with those other people that support their same views and feel less negative, so more positive. And that those social media experiences that we share, those political media experiences, people are connecting with other people that share the same political values as them in the conversation, or they tend to be doing that. So, and we generally think that in connecting with others will make the overall experience more positive in the excitement level, so you'll be more excited. You're positively engaging with people about politics. So we proposed 2 general hypotheses for this type of study. We thought that talking with others about the debate would lead to a more positive debate watching experience, and doing that in person rather than in a mediated context over social media would have even more positive effects, and that social debate watching would lead to more debates watched. So if you engage socially while you're watching one debate, you would watch more debates in the future. So we surveyed the newspaper subscribers that we had. We sent them an electronic email that contained a link to a survey, and we offered them a chance to win $250 for participating. And we had 716 individuals from both newspapers take into our survey. And we generally asked several different questions. We wanted to put in a lot of controls for individual differences. So we asked, general demographic questions, age, race, education, those sorts of things. And we also measured general campaign talk, so how much they had talked about the campaign, both in their communities around them interpersonally, and their interest in the campaign. So whether they watched a lot of news about the campaign and had general higher campaign knowledge of what was happening in 2012. For the independent variables, we wanted to explore media use, both on a national level, so we asked them how much general media they had been exposed to regarding the campaign, as well as through their local newspaper. So we asked them how much they read their local newspaper. And we wanted to capture our debate socialization, or the ways that we were measuring social watching debate. So whether they watched a debate with someone else, whether they communicated over Twitter while they were watching the debate, or whether they communicated over Facebook while they were watching the debate. And for our dependent variables in this analysis, we measured debate watching intensity, or a suite of questions that we term debate watching intensity, that generally correspond to how much a person enjoyed the debate. So we asked them, how much did you enjoy the debate? How much attention did you pay to the debate? How exciting was it? Those sorts of things. And how many debates they watched. So we asked them whether they watched no debates, part of each debate, or all of each debate. So those were our variables that we used in this analysis. We used regression to test these overall hypotheses. The control variables were entered into the first block of the equation, and the theoretic variables were entered into the second block. Now, predicting debate enjoyment, we found that the control model and the independent model were significant. So having all of our control variables positively predicted enjoyment of the debate. As you'll see, that was likely because of campaign talk and interest. And also adding in the variables of theoretic interest was also a significant model, increased the variance accounted for by our regression equation significantly. And here is the numbers, which is very small. That's unfortunate. I cannot zoom in. So I'll point it out here. Here's the first block, and in this regression equation, this only dealt with the control variables, and the dependent variable in this regression was focusing on enjoyment of the debate. So campaign talk was the only significant control variable. So as a person intended to engage in more campaign talk in their general life, they enjoyed the debates more. That pretty much makes sense. People who like campaigns or talk about campaigns tend to enjoy politics. When we entered into the variables of our theoretic exploration, we also found that campaign talk was still a significant predictor of debate enjoyment in a positive fashion, as was political media use. So generally reading more political media made you more likely to enjoy the debate, and also interpersonal socialization. So if you watched the debate with another person in the room, you tended to enjoy your debate watching more. This supported our first hypothesis. And the other forms of debate socialization were not significant predictors of increased enjoyment of the debate. So if you communicated on Facebook or over Twitter, that wasn't a significant predictor of enjoying the debate more. So interpersonal socialization makes people tend to enjoy the debate more. Focusing on predicting the amount of debates watched, we find that the control model was a significant fit to the data, and also the independent model, the model that contained all the theoretical variables, was a significant fit as well. Adding the theoretic variables increased our variance significantly to a total of 63.6% of the final variance in the dependent variable explained by our independent variables. Here's the data again. Here's the first block that represents the control block. We kept debate watching intensity in this regression equation, but we moved it to a control variable. So we wanted to control for how much the person said that they enjoyed the debate. And that was a significant predictor of the amounts of debates watched in a positive fashion. So if you enjoy the debate more, you watch more debates. Also, campaign talk and campaign interests were positively related to the amount of debates watched. And partisanship was negatively related to the amount of debates watched. And our partisanship measure was situated so that a negative score was associated with liberals and Democrats, and a positive score was associated with Republicans. So if you were a Democrat, you're more likely to watch more debates. Moving into the theoretic variables, we find that, also age and sex were predictors in the theoretic in the control regression as well. Moving to the next block, we find that the sex differences disappeared. They weren't no longer significant predictors. Everything else was the same except for campaign interest. That fell out of significance as well. And also newspaper use, political media use, interpersonal socialization, and Twitter socialization were all significant predictors of watching more debates. Newspaper use negatively, we'll talk about that variable and the issues with that in a moment. But as you watched more political media, you were more likely to watch more debates. As you watched the debates with more people in person, you were more likely to watch more debates. And as you watched the debates while communicating over Twitter, you were more likely to watch more debates. The newspaper use variable, that hit a plateau at the high level. We asked them how often they read their newspaper, and they were all subscribers, so everybody said they read it every day. So that wasn't really a good variable for us to use, didn't explain a lot. So this has some implications. So one really interesting thing about this data was that the Twitter use variable kind of came out of nowhere. It didn't have a significant influence on whether a person enjoyed the debate more, but they tended to watch more debates if they did it. So this is kind of an interesting finding that we're still wrapping our heads around, and we're beginning to conceptualize a separate function of debates that's surrounding around the watching experience with other people within our social debate watching theory. So those are overall our findings from this study. So I'll pass it on to Brian, who will talk about future directions of this project.
So a lot going on here, I think. I mean, I'm associated with this project, but I'm still sort of amazed at all the different lines and threads that have been explored and that we've sort of been pursuing and chasing. A lot of them very practical, a lot of them more kind of social, scientific, and academic. And then several of them a nice intersection of those two approaches, which is why this has been a really fantastic project. So where do we go from here? Clearly there's some time left in this fellowship, so even though I think we've produced some things that are interesting, there's more time here and more work to be done. So where are we headed, for the rest of this fellowship and then beyond? This is sort of the roadmap to give you an idea of some of the things that we have in mind. So these are kind of our overall broad goals of the things that we want to do with our time left and beyond there. The first is really to take some of these experiences we've had working with Twitter as a big data set, as a hodgepodge of stuff that's difficult to understand at first glance, and develop some tools or some processes that researchers like ourselves and journalists can use to better incorporate this data into their reporting, into their research, into their understanding about what's going on. So there really aren't a lot of good, easy tools for journalists and academics to use. And so our hope is to develop some of these. And there's a campus initiative that Charles Davis here is heading up around big data that's related to Mizzou Advantage, which hopefully most of you heard about. And so this offers us a nice opportunity to connect with that effort and really hopefully have an influence on the social media component of big data. Second, we want to continue to explore how news organizations are using social media, how they use it now, what the obstacles are, what the challenges are, what the opportunities are. This really ties into a lot of what Alicia was talking about and can be informed by things like what Josh was talking about from our evidence from how users are using these things to develop some products and best practices to help journalists and organizations better use social media, or maybe not better use, but more frequently utilize or more strongly integrate into their processes. And then finally, continue to establish a national presence for this Twitter team. I think, as Mitchell kind of alluded to at the very beginning, we hit this topic at a good time as it was sort of emerging. And so I think we've been able to be part of the national and even international conversation. And so clearly we want to continue to do that. Here's just a few examples of where we've had some success in this area. We had an appearance on NPR's All Things Considered Science Friday talking about Twitter and politics in the election, which was excellent. We have a nice write-up about an editor and publisher about this project and some of our work. And then, as Mitchell talked about, a lot of the local coverage of this product and project. And so, additionally, academic conferences and all these other means of sort of getting our findings out, connecting with other opportunities, and sort of further establishing, again, leadership and presence in this area for RJI and the University of Missouri and our team. Now, maybe more specifically than just these broader goals, these are the next steps that we have coming, immediately for the rest of the semester that this team will be involved in. The first is this Hurley Symposium, which is scheduled April 9th in Washington, D.C. It'll be held at the National Press Club, and it's going to be a one-day symposium of politicians, journalists, news organizations, ourselves, some other academics working on Twitter that are going to come together to have a discussion about how social media is being used related to news and politics, how second screens are being used. One of the other RJI fellow teams that are working on the second screen project in St. Louis will be a part of it as well. So it's really bringing together a lot of these RJI elements and people who are doing this work in DC and in the national media together to have a conversation. There are some things that we want to say and tell them about that we're finding, but we also really want to hear from them about what they're encountering, what their processes are. So again, we can be sort of part of this national conversation about this emergent technology and sort of new area of journalism and research. And then we're also, the sort of second point here is that before the end of the semester, we're going to implement a national survey. It's actually going to be a Twitter experiment. We're going to use an online data collection to actually test some of the things we're seeing about Twitter. So we have a lot of hypotheses about if it's a journalist tweeting versus the actual news organization, which of those tweets will be more effective in terms of creating trust with the audience, in terms of getting the audience to click on the links, in terms of the audience having some brand loyalty, these sorts of things. So we have a lot of sort of anecdotal, I guess, hypotheses that we actually want to test with an experiment, with a national panel survey. That's sort of the highest quality data you can get for this type of understanding. And so RJI, is providing this opportunity for us to get these data. And I think they'll be very influential in how we sort of think about these things. And then finally, again, just to reiterate Alicia's, as she mentioned, developing tools and best practices for newspapers, news organizations, and journalists to sort of use some of these tools and incorporate some of our findings into how those are used as sort of a practical and applied outcome that can be useful for the audiences that we're trying to target. So those are the next steps and where we sort of go from here. So I think we have 15 minutes, so plenty of time for questions if anyone has questions as you contemplate the universe. Existential social media questions.
And the Twitter system itself crashed on the night of the first debate, and I was just amazed that the folks in the social media industry folks were not equipped and capable and anticipating. It was frustrating. It was, I kept thinking, we were well prepared to pull, but that's right. I could, and then their response was, well, there was such a response and overload. We just weren't ready for it. I'm thinking, well, where have they been? That and that I think is related to a point that Brian made in terms of wrapping our hands and heads around these big data sets and being able to manage and make sense out of. So and that's been a frustrating part. That was a surprise and frustrating thing.
Yeah, that's what I would echo that sort of that second point particularly of it seems like it would be intuitively easy to look at Twitter and understand what's going on, understand what the conversation is, understand what the themes are. But the conversation on Twitter, particularly for these big events, is so huge that it's really quite difficult to make sense of the conversation beyond just taking a few tweets and saying, here's what one Twitterer said, here's what another Twitterer said, and that's sort of the end of your story. So it potentially could be, absolutely. That's right, right, absolutely. Is there a conversation going on? We like to think of Twitter as sort of the electronic town hall and this conversation or discussion, but that may not be the reality of it. But even understanding that requires some sophisticated understanding of what's going on that is difficult to create and achieve. And it seems like it's going to be a lot easier till you actually get going. And then it's just roadblock after stumble after issue, which is why a lot of people aren't doing it.
I was surprised, and I shouldn't be because I used to work in newsrooms. But there were so many people who said, "Oh man, the debates tonight. We really ought to do something." And so they were glad to have this come along. And they were really glad for actual content. I think Jacksonville actually published something we wrote and wanted our byline on it. So, hey, we got that going for us. Dallas in particular, they were just head over heels with how it went, and they clearly want to have this now as the starting place for any future big events. This is what they want to do. Maybe not necessarily partnering with us, but it really did show them how effective, and I think they were really pleased to see 1,000 people tweeting. But the one thing I keep going back to is there's not a cohesive plan in a lot of newsrooms, and there's still resistance. Just like when we used to ask the sports guys to go on TV, they'd grumble and say, I don't want to do it. There are still people resisting social media. And on one hand, it's because sometimes they get in trouble for what they say. So clearly it's going to be an integral part of big projects going forward.
If you're doing something with other people, then it's an event you're both engaging in. So you may feel those social pulls to engage in politics more. So that's like why we saw it not influence enjoyment, but it did influence more debates watched. That was kind of the hint where I was trying to say, like, there may be something else going on here, that maybe it's a social cue, that people want to connect socially, or it's a social event rather than a political event. So you don't enjoy the debate, but you enjoy connecting with the other people you're watching the debate with, or something along those lines. That's potentially true.
Sentiment is sort of the promised land of Twitter. If we could just, glean sentiment, what people really think. And it sounds great, and there's plenty of people trying to do it until you actually try to do it and you see how difficult it is. For a lot of the reasons that you all probably know, there's huge amounts of sarcasm on Twitter. So, hey, nice job, Romney, doesn't always mean nice job, Romney. It often means you totally botched that one. Lots of abbreviations, lots of slang, lots of emergent terms and spellings, and so it's very difficult. As we've experienced when we've looked at a lot of different ways to create a sentiment index to really get a good measure of sentiment. So I think, yeah. Yeah, they're taking a lot of different approaches to it. They're taking computer learning, or they use large groups of humans to code a bunch of content to then inform how a computer, the dictionary of the computer, and then the computer is supposed to continue to learn how sentiment occurs in Twitter and code it. So it's sort of a human and machine learning combination. I mean, quite sophisticated. And even those are not working at a real high level yet. So again, it's something that everyone wants to do, but it's incredibly difficult. So how do we do that? I mean, I think that's probably the $1 billion question right now for Twitter. Because if you can do that and can do it well, boy, you are. Yeah, and we've talked to sort of several, there's some academic shops that are doing it. There are some for-profit shops that are doing it. And usually most of the times you see for-profit shops doing it, they're doing it related to brands and PR, because that's where you can really, make the money if you have a thing that works. And so we've been in discussions with them, and I guess, it's such a difficult thing to do that it's easy to see where it's not working well. And we've even seen published reports during the election of, here's our Twitter analysis. And there was one, and it was Romney got more positive tweets from our sentiment analysis. And they were saying, here's the top sources for the positive tweets about Romney. And one of them was Tea Party Cat. It was like this completely satirical account that every tweet was just a satirical, tongue-in-cheek, snarky, snideful remark about Romney, and it was lighting up as positive tweets. And this was NBC News that reported it, and it's like, whoa, I'm sure they ran it through the machine and published it, and there it was. And it shows the difficulty and sort of what doesn't work yet.
Yeah. 60%, the Pew Research that said that 39% of Americans use social media for political purposes found that some 60% of American adults use social media generally. The more difficult, it tends to be younger, tends to be college, like people who have been through college, moderately wealthy people. So it's not exactly a map of the U.S. population. However, the more difficult part is reaching these people for the specific event. So there's a self-selection. You choose to tweet about something. So either it's probably really important to you for some reason or another, and that in and of itself isn't generalizable. Yes, yeah. It's not a bad thing at all, but it is something to consider, you know. And it's also like very difficult to get these people to like take a survey.
Along those lines, at first, remember when we first looked at sentiment, one of the problems we had with the vendor was they based their sentiment analysis on influential tweeters. And it was just those who tweet more are favored than in the sentiment analysis, and that's not reflective.
Yeah.
Of course, what is real public opinion these days? You know, I mean, how can you even get it? Okay. Well, thanks for coming out and braving the snow. We appreciate it.